Oh, well, get for your community.
It's nice. And
We're good?
Well, thanks for all you did, friends.
Okay. We're good. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the November 9th, 2023 Mobility Working Group meeting. My name is Councilmember Jose Rodriguez from the City of National City. We'll be kicking off the meeting today. For starters, can we confirm, Tessa, if we have quorum?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have a quorum for this meeting.
Thank you, Tessa. And before we begin our items, we'd like to review the meeting process on how both working group members as well as the public wish to participate. For working group members, when you would like to speak, simply raise your hand and we'll make sure to call on you. And Tessa, do you want to give a quick explanation of how the public can participate, please?
If you are a member of the public in the room and you wish to speak on any agenda item, including non-agenda public comments, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to me here at the table, or any staff member who will bring it to me at the beginning of each item or anytime at the beginning of the meeting. And if you are a member of the public online, please raise your hand virtually and I will call on you when the item is complete. We call on members of the public that are present first and then virtual.
Thank you, Tessa. Starting off with the meeting on item number 1, public comments. Do we have any comments from the members of the public?
I do not have any public comments.
Any working group member comments?
Yes, Chair, I have a comment.
Yep.
Regarding our items which are on the agenda, I'm getting questions from your board member and my council member regarding on items which are brought to the board of directors, if the item has been brought to the mobility working group, and she's asking questions about like background on like why, the history of the data. And so as you know, or those that follow the board agenda, they've got some really heavy mobility related items. So just 2 on the last agenda was like the low sand corridor. It's informational, but a ton of discussion, really good discussion on that item. And then secondly, the budget amendment, the increased budget, which is terrific, right? We're getting all this new money, but those are 2 things which we did not have on this agenda. So my ask is we all, we love the charter. We love what we're working on. We're working on improved mobility in our region. We all, I think, agree upon that. That's terrific. What I would ask is just in the interest of promoting and maximizing our collaboration, if we could do what we can to place important items related to mobility for discussion and action on this agenda so that we get them before they go to the Transportation Committee and the Board of Directors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. I think that's a very reasonable request. I will have a conversation with our chair and Supervisor Nora Vargas, and we'll discuss items coming back. Thank you. Any other comments from working group members? Yep.
yeah, just to follow up on Tom's comment, I've experienced a similar situation with in briefing our mayor on the board items, and these are items that that I'm not familiar with. And so I am wondering, the one thing I noticed is that our work plan was adopted in July of 2022. I think it was intended to be updated annually. It doesn't look like we had another work plan for 2023. And so I'm wondering if we could have a future agenda item to discuss the mobility working group's work plan. And in light of, the regional transportation plan and the Transnet ordinance amendment and some of the things that have happened in the last 18 months, if we could potentially discuss our work plan and maybe at that meeting have some consideration for a subcommittee or some other additional discussions surrounding what items we're reviewing and what items might be coming up in the future so that we can provide some input and feedback as to areas where we feel like we might be able to provide some value to the region in, providing feedback on transportation related issues.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing it up. I do think it's important for us to look at SANDAG as a whole and realize that we are working groups and subgroups are critical as well. So I do look forward to our next retreat as SANDAG. I know we did one earlier this year, but I think that will give us a better idea of where we're going as an entity and then going to provide some direction for us as a working group as well. So yes, I look forward to having those ongoing discussions as well.
And Chair, I have one more comment related to Julie's comment. And this is a question either for you or for staff is with our board charter, what is the method for us to make motions like minute motions or something to support a comment and to further request that it be placed on an upcoming agenda? Can I make a minute motion at this point? Okay, so I would support Julie's comment and make a minute motion to her exactly to Escondido's point.
And I would second that, Mosammak City of Solana Beach.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Can we clarify the motion?
Yeah, specifically, my request was for a future agenda item to update our work plan so that we can create something for 2024 and also to consider a committee, a subcommittee or some other form that we might discuss in detail and plan our agenda for the future mobility working group meetings.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the agenda for us next year. It looks like we're meeting Thursday, January 11th at 9:30. I'm going to turn to SANDAG staff to see if that's something that we could be placing on the agenda for that meeting or a meeting shortly after.
Yeah, I think for sure we can get the work plan on the next agenda and then we can have a discussion item related to requests for subcommittee items.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion at hand? No? All right. Do we need in order to vote, do we have clickers or no?
No, just have, we'll just ask them to raise their hands for each yes, no, abstain, or
Great. Everybody in favor? Raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention. All right, item moves forward. Thank you. We look forward to that discussion on the Thursday, January 11th, next working group meeting. Great. Any other comments or questions on item number 1? Can we make sure the microphone is on, please, Tessa? Or I'm not.
Okay, there it is.
Thank you.
Perfect. Good morning. My name is Ruby Morales, and I'm a regional planner on the integrated transportation team. It's that time of the year when SANDAG wishes to collaborate with our local government agencies to gather information through the Transnet Local Streets and Roads program. For those who don't know, the Local Streets and Roads report is conducted annually, and it includes details on the status of existing, ongoing, and future projects within your local jurisdictions. Like previous reports, the report will be presented to the Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee, ITOC, in spring of 2024. So I will be following up via email with each local agency to provide you with more information as well as the official Excel template form to be completed. And I would just like to know that this form is different from the ones filled out in previous years. In addition to a completed form, we ask that you provide us with links and photo documentation that is available. All submissions will be due on January 9th, 2024. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me as I will be your main point of contact and my information will be on the email. Thank you.
Okay, I have one update as well. As we just mentioned, our next meeting will be on January 11th, and at that meeting, we will approve the calendar for 2024. We are looking at the same date and time, and so this will be on a consent agenda. So if you guys have any questions about that, it'll be on the next meeting on January 11th. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any additional comments? All right, moving on to item number 2, approval of the meeting minutes. Do we have any comments from the members of the public?
Thank you. There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Any working group member comments or questions? I will entertain a motion for adoption of item number 2.
Move approval of the minutes.
I'll
Mr.
second.
Thank you. Mr. Samak placed the motion and Mr. Frank second the motion. Any discussion on the item? Everybody in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. Motion passes. All right, we have a report. We have an update from Transnet Extension Ordinance Amendments by our very own Michelle Smith.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm the Manager of Financial Programming. With me today on this item is Josh Clark, Associate Regional Planner. And as you may have seen in the updates in the report, the progress on the Transnet Ordinance Amendments. For quick background, a subcommittee was formed in July of 2022 as a smaller component of this working group to review and provide suggestions to various items in the ordinance and Board Policy 31. Their first meeting occurred in November of 2022, and after working feverishly for many months, the subcommittee asked staff to slow down the pace for time to discuss and review the proposed amendments. The subcommittee has agreed to changes which include updating transit operator eligibility to focus more on the California Public Utilities Code parameters related to the TDA instead of CPI for eligible funding. They also approved to remove the 70-30 maintenance and congestion relief split for the Transnet local streets improvement spending requirements, to include dig smart policies when using Transnet funding, and also updates to the Smart Growth Incentive Program. The subcommittee voted to remove geographic boundaries from the eligibility requirements and broadening to any projects that advance multimodal transportation and also demonstrate meaningful vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Attachment 4 to this report provides an updated draft work plan and schedule through the end of April 2024, focusing our remaining time on performance monitoring and reporting. The subcommittee will be taking a break for the holidays and will resume meetings in January, and staff will return to the Mobility Working Group to provide another update in March following their February meeting. We are excited on how the subcommittee has progressed, and I hope all appreciate that we have slowed down to allow for more time and review to make informed decisions. We are looking forward to tackling the additional big issue in the new year to determine performance monitoring and reporting for the entire region. That being said, we wanted to bring a continual point of discussion for us regarding rule number 21 in board policy number 31 regarding the bicycle and pedestrian accommodations to the mobility working group as a whole for further discussion. This has been a continual discussion among the subcommittee and SANDAG staff, and we understand why there's a difference of opinion. We admire the passion and the commitment that the subcommittee members have for their cities and the county, and we want to ensure that all comments are heard and responded to. Attachment 1 to the report contains the comments provided by the subcommittee at their February and October meetings with SANDAG's corresponding responses. Attachment 2 provides the staff recommendations to rule number 21, while attachment 3 provides recommendations provided by the subcommittee, which was presented to SANDAG staff during the October meeting. Staff is still taking time to review the subcommittee's recommendations and wanted to share them with this group. Attachment 5 is the original Rule 21 as it currently stands to provide some comparison. So why are we here? After a few attempts to schedule an in-person workshop to go through Rule 21, we were unable to have subcommittee members meet in person to discuss. And so we are here at the Mobility Working Group to find some common ground between the subcommittee and SANDAG so that we can move forward with this item. With that, I will turn it over to Josh Clark, who has been instrumental in working on the proposed changes and addressing all comments from the subcommittee.
Hey all, thank you. So apologies, this is my first time running a PowerPoint. Okay, all. Joshua Clark. I am in the engineering and construction division here at SANDAG. I'm an active transportation planner, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to provide a quick background on SANDAG's board policy number 31, Rule 21, a combination of bicyclists and pedestrians. Many thanks to Ordinance Amendment Subcommittee members here today who have helped refine this proposed revision to Rule 21. I appreciate that you subcommittee members saw some of these slides back at the beginning of the year, so I'm about to do the executive summary version here for everyone who hasn't seen it, and I'll be as quick as possible, but give me a few minutes, please. With the next few slides, I'll discuss Rule 21's origins SANDAG's efforts ensuring compliance, the ITAC audit recommendations to update the rule and improve compliance, and a brief summary of work to date addressing these recommendations. On this slide is an early reference to pedestrians and bicyclists in the ordinance from 2004. And I'm going to read aloud the last sentence because it's been fundamentally guiding this process. Such facilities for pedestrian and bicycle use shall be designed to the best currently available standards and guidelines. The next major reference to pedestrian and bike is in the Ordinance and Expenditure Plan Implementation Guidelines from 2006. It focused on the 70-30 split, which the subcommittee is recommending to eliminate. So add this project and this image of this project here to the list of reasons to eliminate the 70-30 split. So this is an example of one of the maintenance and non-congestion relief projects that was only eligible on the 30% side of the split because this was a lane removal for bike lanes project. It's on the regional bike network just outside the building here on 4th and 5th Avenues. It was first upgraded by the city of San Diego in 2015 by converting one of 3 general purpose travel lanes to an inside and outside buffered class 2 bike lane. It was then upgraded by SANDAG to the class 4 protected bikeway shown here in 2021. By the way, our evaluation results found bike ridership is up 54% with this class 4 after condition compared to the class 2 buffered bike lane before condition. So now we get to Board Policy 31, Rule 21, adopted February 26, 2008. It is attachment 5, as Michelle mentioned, in the agenda packet. And for some context around the time period when it was written and adopted, the first bicycle measures in Rule 21 states that the bikeway facility types would still be forthcoming as developed through the 2007 Regional Bicycle Plan. Fast forwarding to now, that plan was adopted in 2009. It was then updated in 2013 in the Early Action Program, and again, incrementally updated in 3 consecutive regional plans. So in the adopted Rule 21, there's another mention of in reference to best available standards, which in 2008 were bikeway standards designed for use by approximately 8% of our region's population, strong and fearless, enthused and confident bike riders. Pedestrian provisions call for sidewalks on both sides of the street, marked crosswalks at signalized intersections, and ADA compliant curb ramps. So in 2014, SANDAG performed a detailed evaluation of bike and pedestrian accommodations in Transnet funded projects, finding that there was room for improvement in compliance and that, for example, not all street maintenance overlay projects included the minimum bicycle and pedestrian accommodations or accommodations covering the entire length of the projects. Also noted, it was difficult to evaluate the impact of the rule on the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure since only 6 local agencies tracked bike facilities funded with Transnet and only 3 agencies tracked pedestrian facilities. Additionally, the review determined that a checklist to evaluate projects was needed and that local agencies had compliance questions. Also, at the end of 2014, SANDAG's board approved the Complete Streets policy, which has such a checklist. And in that policy, it states that SANDAG would periodically evaluate the effectiveness of Rule 21 to ensure compliance with the provision and that the rule reflects current best practices in Complete Streets implementation. Much of what I just mentioned is captured on page 76 of the 2018 ITAC triennial audit. The screenshot here is from page 77. These are the high priority recommendations, which read, to better understand whether local street and road program spending is delivering projects that result in the best performance outcome and value for taxpayer investment, the ITAC should request the SANDAG board to direct staff to perform the following listed here. And so we have been in high gear working on these with the subcommittee this year. The 2018 audit prompted a work plan in 2019, which included discussions with SANDAG working groups and advisory committees. To quote the work plan, the overall approach to providing a solution to these challenges is to clarify and streamline the process for both the local jurisdictions and SANDAG's ability to monitor. As mentioned in the last slide, we're working toward these expected outcomes with an opportunity to develop changes to Project Track 2 that will help member agencies and SANDAG. Okay, here's an excellent visual developed by Southwest Strategies. Thank you. To recap the time period that we mentioned in the previous slides and shows our reference guidance for the Rule 21 revisions. Shown below the timeline are major SANDAG accomplishments, major SANDAG developments pertaining to the accommodation of bicyclists and pedestrians, the earliest of which is that 2004 ordinance language, which provides our first reference to pedestrians and bicyclists. With that quote again that I'll say, such facilities for pedestrian and bicycle use shall be designed to the best currently available standards and guidelines. We see examples here above the timeline of the best currently available standards and guidelines published since Rule 21 was adopted in 2008. Note, these are all FHWA or NACDO published guidance and are incorporated in the recommended revisions to Rule 21. I want to reiterate, the best available standards 15 years ago were bikeway standards designed for use by 8% of our region's total population. Indeed, these design standards are evident throughout the region and are often on our regional bike network adopted in 2009, where nearly all the existing built on-road segments and majority of proposed bikeways have been planned and designed for strong and fearless, enthused, and confident riders. What about the rest of the 1.1 million people in the region who bike? That number shown at the top of this chart was determined by our local trade group, the SD Sports Innovators, in 2016. The majority of these folks are the interested but concerned type. To have a bike in the garage, and based on the quote below from the same source, they were looking to upgrade it. Well, we saw these folks get on those bikes in 2020. Sure, gyms and parks were closed, but also traffic volumes were low, making streets less stressful and more inviting for the interested but concerned rider. And we saw a 42% increase in ridership on the regional bike network. And I think that we know that if any of those 29% were still looking to buy a new bike, at that point, they were out of luck. But now, if they're buying a bike, it's probably an e-bike. They're doubling their use of that new e-bike compared to the old one. They're replacing car trips and they're riding farther. And we know the number of e-bike riders is growing. Looking back at the first chart, it's interesting to look at these other cities that they chose to compare our region to. So I'd just like to talk about them briefly in the next slide. Let's see how our region's bike network stacks up. The first thing that jumps out, 85% of Austin's network is separated or off-street. That's 50% for Minneapolis. And in our region, it's just 12%. Those places had a big jump on us. 10 years ago, they were building the protected separated class 4 bikeways. At the time, the only one we had in the region was Mission Valley's Friars Road cycle track, built in the 1970s. These other cities have been upgrading their conventional painted bike lanes, as you can see in the chart. And I've added the previously mentioned 4th and 5th Avenue project, because that was an upgrade of a conventional bike lane to a separated bike lane too. So we're catching up. Another major difference is these two cities have committed to building an all ages and abilities network. This chart shows Austin reached 50% network completion by 2021, aiming for 100% by 2025. And a longitudinal study in Minneapolis shows the impact of converting a mile of level of traffic stress. This is the chart at the bottom right with the images. Converting LTS 3 and 4 to 1 and 2 on their connected network was associated with a 14% higher increase in bike volumes, 26% higher relative probability for females choosing cycling rather than other modes, and 76% higher relative probability for the low-income group choosing cycling rather than other modes. There is an imperial equity relationship to a bikeway network. Okay, let's take a moment to look at findings of researchers that have been studying the relationship between biking safety and infrastructure. 10 years ago, they published findings that showed a positive correlation between people biking and better safety outcomes, hence safety in numbers. But with so many protected bikeways being built in their US study cities since then, they revisited the findings and determined better safety outcomes are instead associated with a greater prevalence of bike facilities. It's the infrastructure. Let's look at the findings of a study presented at this year's TRB, which controlled for bike and ped motor vehicle exposure, was in Portland. It found that a person riding their bike on a conventional bike lane was 45% less likely to be in a collision when compared with no bike facility. The study also found that a person riding their bike on a protected bike lane was 97% less likely to be in a collision when compared with no bike facility. Here are our San Diego regional bikeway mileage numbers for class 2 and class 4 bikeways from the 2021 State of the Commute report for reference. Lastly, the most recent publication I've seen on this subject, here are the FHWA published crash modification factors, or CMFs, for class 4 bikeways, which are referred to here as separated bike lanes. A CMS is a multiplicative factor used to compute the expected number of crashes after implementing a given countermeasure at a specific site. So the findings here are consistent with that Portland study that I just mentioned. They demonstrate that CMFs for SBLs show a clear trend that with their implementation, an agency can expect to see a reduction in bicycle crashes between 40 to 55% compared to a traditional or buffered bike lane. I think we all recognize that we need to use all available means to start implementing such countermeasures immediately. As we look at this chart showing the regional collision trends during the period we've been discussing, preliminary 2021 data shows that the fatalities are continuing to increase. I know you all and your colleagues have been coordinating with our SANDAG colleagues on efforts like this regional safety dashboard. So I just want to say we appreciate that and all collective efforts since the board of directors adopted a regional Vision Zero action plan and resolution on July 22nd last year. I hope this was helpful background on the update to SANDAG's Board Policy 31, Rule 21, accommodation of bicyclists and pedestrians. Many thanks again to the Ordinance Amendment Subcommittee members here today who have helped refine the proposed revision to Rule 21. The latest subcommittee members' recommendations are attachment 3, as Michelle mentioned, and we've been detailing the process of revising Rule 21 with the group as attachment 1. Thank you all.
Very detailed presentation. Thank you all so much. It seems rather obvious. If it looks safe and it feels safe, more folks will ride it, right? So thank you for the presentation. Do we have any comments from the members of the public?
Thank you. I do have 4 hands raised from the members of the public. San Diego County Bicycle Coalition, please go ahead.
Good morning and thank you all. My name is Chloe Lauer. I'm the Executive Director of the San Diego County Bicycle Coalition. The coalition supports the recommended revisions to the Board Policy Number 31, Rule 21, Accommodation of Bicyclists and Pedestrians. The revisions reflect the best practices for active transportation facility implementation. Having these guidelines in place will ensure any Transnet-funded project in our region will prioritize the safety of vulnerable road users, and it's imperative that complete streets are the standard for our region. Leading pedestrian indicators, shelters at transit stops, and marked crosswalks are some of the simple and logical recommendations in Rule 21 that will make biking and walking more comfortable and enjoyable for all. Streets are public spaces and the glue that hold our communities together. Not only should streets be safe, they must be beautiful, inspiring, and accessible. We urge you to adopt these revisions. Thank you.
Our next public commenter, Laura Keenan, please go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Laura Keenan, co-founder of Families for Safe Streets San Diego. We're a group of families who have had loved ones killed in traffic collisions or are survivors ourselves. My husband, Matt Keenan, was one of those statistics in 2021. He was killed by a wrong-way driver in a painted bike lane on a 35-mile-an-hour road. I'm speaking in favor of these amendments to adhere to best practices and NACTO standards. NACTO is the gold standard with proven life-saving tools. And as we just saw, deaths and serious injuries continue to rise in our county. And what SANDAG and other organizations are doing today is not enough. If the street where my husband was killed adhered to NACTO standards, Matt would still be alive today and we'd be raising our now 3-year-old son together. NACTO has the power to save lives by implementing these amendments, or it can choose to let more people die on our streets. Aren't humans worth doing everything possible to follow the gold standard? I'd say, wasn't my husband's life or the next friend, child, or partner worth it? Thank you, I appreciate it.
Our next public commenter, Nicole Burgess, please go ahead. You'll be followed by the final commenter, Jim Barros.
Good morning, Mobility Working Group. My name is Nicole Burgess, and I just am calling to support the staff recommendations for amending the Transnet amendment. It's much overdue, and it really reflects that we are in a time of where we can create better and safer facilities that so more people can get out and ride. The entire region of San Diego is blessed with a large quantity of big spaces and big roads, and how we allocate that space can invite more people to get out of their car and find the beauty of moving without those limitations, and having those safe facilities is how we encourage it. Having that safe infrastructure that is consistent, uniform, safe, and comfortable for more people to ride is going to be transformative for our city and our region. And so I ask all the cities really to support these revisions, as it really is going to benefit your cities the most, and truly support people that want to get out and feel that freedom of riding a bike in our cities. So thank you for your support, and thank you very much, staff and the subcommittee, for all your work on this effort. Thank you.
Our next commenter, Jim Barros, please go ahead. You are self-muted. Go ahead, Jim. I don't think your audio is working, Jim. I do have one other hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and call on Anar. Please go ahead.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Anar Salayev, Executive Director at Bike San Diego. We are in support of these amendments. As mentioned, if we as a region are serious about saving lives, shifting people's travel preferences, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, alleviating congestion, and helping people save money, we need to take bold action both at the municipal and regional level. And these amendments are a step in that direction. Thank you.
And I'm going to go to Jim one more time. Go ahead, Jim. I don't think Jim's audio is working. Jim, if you do have comments, please go ahead and email them to clerkoftheboard@sandag.org, and we will make sure that they are submitted to the membership.
Thank you so much, Tessa. Do we have any working group member comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Frank.
Chair, I have a very short presentation and some comments on the topic.
Thank you. Can we accommodate the presentation and slideshow to be on?
And can I just say forward, or is there a clicker for me to advance the slide?
Just say, or if you'd like to go up to the podium.
Sure. Okay.
Oh, Joseph.
Thank you. All right. So,
If you want to do it.
okay, clicker works. Thank you. All right. So I'm Tom Frank, Transportation Director, City Engineer for the City of Carlsbad. And I really appreciate the presentation. And I think we all have the same goal, and that's how we can improve safety on our roadways for all the users. In particular, today, we're talking about Policy 21, which I support the objectives of the board to improve that safety. So context is important. And we just have concluded a year of an emergency declaration by our city council on how we can address improving the safety for all modes. In particular, there was several fatalities in our city on bicyclists, and the most tragic that really gripped the heart of the community was a woman who was riding on an e-bike with her baby, and she was killed. She was actually drugged underneath a forerunner. The child ejected, luckily, and survived, and the husband now, Bob Emery, is raising their child without that mother. So super tragic. We have done what we can within a year's time, and I'm going to glance through that rather quickly. A bit about myself. That timeline you saw regarding Transnet and the implementation of all these great guidelines. I've actually been working with SANDAG since the early 2000s, so I actually lived through that timeline. So great guidelines have been developed. And for those calling in, I support what you're saying. We all want safer infrastructure. Context is important in this, and that's what we're going to be talking to today. So as I mentioned, here's just a couple of slides about what we experienced over the last year. So we declared the emergency, 2 fatalities on bikes. We did a 3-tiered approach. We call it 3-tiered like a stool. No, it won't work without all of the 3 legs. So of course, I was focused on the engineering. Results to date, what we've seen is a 13% reduction in injury collisions for all modes, particular to bikes, and 18% reduction for e-bikes and 22% for those that pedal. So we've been working diligently to promote safety on our streets. Here's the 100+ capital projects and the other things we've been doing. So here's the touch points we established over the year. And what you'll see is right now under construction and near completion is we have 18 miles of streets for bike lane improvements. Those are designated or shown by the orange lines. You'll see a lot going east-west. We call them the east-west corridors. We also have a rail trail that's under construction. So here's an example where I want to talk about context is important. So we're basically realigning the road where we're narrowing the travel lanes, providing more space for the bicyclists and the pedestrians. And so we presented these buffered bike lanes and green lanes for the conflict areas. And we'd like to vet these through the public because those that use the roadway have a lot of good feedback and you really need to listen to it. 50% of the collisions for bicycles are at intersections. And so that's super important to realize. Class 4 is great. If we were like Netherlands, that would be super. They have protected intersections. So you really have to look at where the collisions are, and we're doing root cause analysis. There's a lot of bicyclists that have single incidents, and those are collisions. So you have to look at really what's the cause. So here's an example where one of our high collision areas by the interchanges, and we were designing the conflict areas and the bike lanes to cross those interchanges. And the experienced bicyclists, like those that submitted comments, Pete Pensieres is a legend who has thousands of miles crossing the nation, and he's one of our commissioners. He said, Tom, what's proposed by Caltrans, and I have to compliment Caltrans. Caltrans stepped up and got these plans approved in a really quick time frame. So Caltrans, congratulations. It's so thankful for what you've done. So these experienced bicyclists said, Tom, what you have initially shown isn't going to work. We need you to revise it. And they came up with suggestions. It went through the public process. We revised it to what's shown in front of you, and it works for them, and it's better for everybody. So context is important. You really have to look at the root causes. Mr. Pensieres, Commissioner Pensieres, I call him, I talked to him on the way down. He couldn't sacrifice his bike ride with his group to be here today. Yes, said he had to draw the lines. What he wanted to share is we have two rather long class 4s in our city, and the problem is at the intersections. It's all about what do you do at the intersections? He said they basically are promoting right hooks. The two biggest causes of bicycle collisions are right hooks and left hooks. So what we have, the two protected bike lanes, class 4, are actually not working for a lot of the bicyclists. So again, context is important. So, this is an emotional topic for me. I've been around for a couple of decades. My life passion is to leave the world a little bit better than when I came into the world. So I'm getting out there, and my second passion, luckily, because it's good to find something in life, is promoting mobility. As the 2010 APWA, American Public Works chapter, I dedicated my sole focus to educate policymakers on implementing complete streets. And I was implementing complete streets before the law got passed. So passionate about it, just as SANDAG staff and those callers are. So I just wanted to leave you with, I thought there was a couple of other slides there. Yeah, can you please put the presentation back up? There should be. Can you? Okay. So here's the Emery family. So Bob's the one, obviously. Then there's Christina and their child. And they were very active at the beginning. His father-in-law, Mark Embry, was one of the ones with Pete Pensieres that said, hey, you need to look at your interchanges and we need to improve those. So we were working with the community to provide the best we could. We did a lot in this last year. One of the corridors he was complaining about, I got to tell you the story. 2 weeks before his wife was killed, he was in front of city council saying, council, you need to do something about Tamarack Avenue. I live on that street. It's out of control. It's unsafe. 2 weeks or a week after his wife's death, he was in front of city council. You could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet. And he spoke in detail about her death. And it was very, very emotional. So I took it to heart. The city took it to heart. And this is a text I received on Halloween. And it just shows that working together, working with SANDAG, we can accomplish great things. So what I leave you with is flexibility is important. There are a ton of guidelines which we work with to implement the best we can. The road lane reductions, which you call, they used to be called road diets. We call them road yoga because it's all about balance and flexibility. We've implemented a lot of those with our 18 miles that are under construction right now. What I'll leave you with is the California METCD has shalls and shoulds. We have enough shalls. We have enough knowledge of our local roadways. What we need now is a policy that is a should. You can provide suggestions and guidelines and work with us in a collaborative manner, but we don't need more requirements. It's hard enough to deliver these projects. And with that, Chair, that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Do we have any additional comments, questions? Yep.
Most City of Solana Beach. I'm also a subcommittee member. And just wanted to make a couple of comments about Tom's presentation. And then I do have my own comments about the subject. I actually seen Tom's presentation in a different format, in different arena. And I asked him, obviously you are a successful city engineer. What you've done in Carlsbad is admirable. And frankly, it's for most of us that actually follow some agencies' improvements and CIP projects. We think that's a role model for us. So I asked Tom, under the new guideline, would you be able to do these projects and you can certainly check with him, but most of the projects that he showed that were all successful and provided high-level success stories were not, will not be able to be implemented under the proposed guidelines. So that's one comment. And then it is true that we as a committee suggested that we should get rid of the 3070 concept because we felt it was too rigid. We felt that it would not allow us as agencies to spend our dollars wisely and respond to our community while providing safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, which is why I joined this committee. I wanted to make sure that what we do is a better product. To those who were on the call earlier, we are not going to sacrifice safety. We're not against bicycle facilities. We're not against pedestrian facilities. What we would like to do is to be able to have flexibility so we could use our Transnet funds to the best and most feasible and beneficial to our community as possible. The ordinance amendment as proposed, it provides more restrictions than the 30-70%. And that was what we were discussing in the last almost 12 months. And under our last meeting, we still are going back and forth with SANDAG staff, trying to come in terms with some reasonable and appropriate amendments that addresses both issues. And as of today, as far as I know, we have not reached that consensus. And this was supposed to be an update to those of us who are not in the subcommittee. So I urge the rest of the committee, mobility group members, to clearly read the proposed amendments and see if it works for your agency. I know it does not work for my agency, and what it does, it provides a lot more restrictions on what I'm going to do for our city, and potentially can push me in a reverse direction, meaning I may not be able to do any CIPs that have any bike lanes in it, or instead use my dollars in a separate and a different fashion. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samak. Ms. Keller?
Thank you. Stephanie Keller, Deputy City Engineer, City of San Marcos. I agree with a lot of the sentiments that we're hearing here today, both from SANDAG staff and from the callers on the phone. We should absolutely be constructing all ages and abilities networks. That is what our region needs. And those networks need to be designed from a region-wide perspective. They need to be strategically located to increase connectivity throughout the region and to have safety in mind, even as a facility crosses municipal boundaries. I think that SANDAG's ATP is ultimately going to help us do this. It's going to look from a region-wide perspective and enable us to select where these facilities should be located in order to really improve safety, really improve connectivity, improve ridership, and make cycling available to even the folks that are not the spandex riders that are very comfortable on any kind of facility, right? So we need to see the class 4s. They need to be located appropriately. And I'd like to see SANDAG's ATP come prior to any kind of change to Rule 21 so that we can consciously and strategically locate our facilities from a region-wide perspective to achieve our goals. I'm concerned that the way that the changes are proposed currently for the rule, I think that they're going to disincentivize Transnet investment on the very facilities where we want to be constructing improvements and increasing ridership. I hate to say this, but as a city, as a municipality, we would be faced with a choice whether to expend those funds, Transnet funds, on, say, San Marcos Boulevard, where we really could make a change and increase safety. And because of these rules, we may need to make a choice that we're not going to use Transnet funding there. We're not going to do those improvements there. And so this, as written, the rule could disincentivize what I think our collective goal is for creating these facilities. So I think we should be moving forward with protected facilities. Class 4s are definitely where we're headed in the future. We need them to be properly connected. We need them to be designed from a regional perspective, and we need to not disincentivize any of these member agencies from being able to construct the improvements that we need to see as a region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. Did I see another hand up here? Sorry, that was, sorry, Muto or Hassan? Muto, sorry.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, or morning. Alyssa Muto with the City of San Diego. So I've been part of the subcommittee as well, and the city just yesterday brought forward a complete streets policy for our city, as well as a mobility master plan that does bring forward the loading priorities for our streets. And that is to prioritize those vulnerable modes, people that are not encapsulated in a vehicle first. We need to plan for them, plan for the future, plan for the existing. I read this and I see this as very much aligned with the city policies that we are bringing forward, as it provides for a variety of options with the NACTO manual. The NACTO manual gives you many options, from quick build to more permanent structures. Also, it is good practice. We know that certain speeds, a bicycle infrastructure needs to look different, or the speeds need to be reduced. So from that perspective, I think that it's really important to see these kinds of improvements in our documentation. However, not every road is built and created the same way, nor is every segment of roadway of a corridor built precisely the same in terms of dimension and scope and scale. Those needs that are existing today, they may be different tomorrow, so we do need to think about that, but there does need to be some flexibility for good engineering design, vision zero, sustainability, and overall city management and operations of those facilities. So I would recommend, from a perspective of providing some level of flexibility, whether it be a consideration for documentation of that exemption, to document why a city has chosen to not be able or is unable to provide for a specific facility. And I think we'll see the same with some of our transit facilities. For example, we would love to have a transit shelter on every significant roadway. Sometimes that is infeasible because a shelter depth and ADA access around that makes that impossible. So how do you document for that exception to the rule? And I think that's a really important aspect of this conversation that we should be putting on the table, but still very much supporting the Complete Streets proposal and supporting that the safe and comfortable mobility options for people of all ages and abilities.
Thank you. Mr. Say, May, sorry.
Thank you. Minji May, City of Santee. I'm generally in agreement with the previous speakers in the sense that I think flexibility is important, because each city and each roadway has its own characteristics, and we, from a city point of view, we look at it from a systematic way, how to improve the system, how to integrate the system, and that's why we have either a bicycle master plan, pedestrian master plan, or active transportation plan, to guide us to build the city towards the goal, to improve safety, improve general service to everybody, including bicyclists and the pedestrians. So that really, one of the main concern or difference I see between the staff proposed guidelines versus the subcommittees that did away with the bicycle master plan or active transportation plan, which I think is a big concern from me. I mean, not me, from my city's point of view, because the plan that we have in place were developed and vetted by committees and also by the bicycle community as well, and also safety, fire, law enforcement, and everybody involved. So that's was considered the work the best under the current conditions and given the funding requirements as well. So that's why I shared the concerns with the other speakers, that by doing away with that, also adding class 4 to a lot of facilities, which I don't, to be honest, I don't think that is feasible in most part of the Santee. There are places that we do want to do that. So that really the two major concerns that I have. And I say this not from a perspective of a cold-blooded engineer, which I am an engineer, not necessarily cold-blooded, but I also myself is a cyclist myself, a casual one. I do that on weekends, and I expect to do more. Even though my current passion is to play tennis myself, but as I'm getting older, my knees are failing me. So I think cycling is definitely an option, which I enjoy greatly. And also my son is a high schooler. He also rides a e-bike to school and around every day. So I really look at from this, I consider myself a part of the bicycle community myself. But that's why from that perspective, we still have to look at it from a practical point of view and feasibility point of view. Really, I think that's what the biggest concern that we have. And also yes, safety definitely is in everybody's mind, particularly from a traffic engineer's point of view. So not to undermine that part, but we reviewed our city's fatalities in the last 20 years. But the fatalities that occurred involving either a cyclist or a pedestrian, about 50% of them were the pedestrian or cyclists were at fault. So what does that tell me? That seems to me this education part maybe play a more role, right? A non-engineering part can play a more role in terms of safety. I think the facilities that we have, not perfect in any sense, but if you are careful, if you are mindful what you're doing, mindful of the environment and the traffic, it can be done in a relatively safe way. I'm not saying it's perfectly safe, but I think we have to look at in a holistic point of approach, so that we can improve our system and also build our projects at the same time. And then we achieve the goal of serving everybody on the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May. Additional comments? Yes, I'm sorry, what's your last name?
Bandigan, City Traffic Engineer, Encinitas.
Thank
you, Chair. I want to start with something that was mentioned a few times by my colleagues here, for ourselves, for the audience, and whoever is listening. The people around this table in their cities and in other cities they've worked at the past 5-10 years, I think have done more for bike and ped safety than the 50 years prior to that. So I want to reiterate that we all do agree with the spirit of this change. It's not like the engineers and planners here today are in any formal way against these changes and active transportation improvements and more bike and ped safety and the fact that we can do more for this vulnerable group. What I want to mention is that whenever we get to a blanket form of policy for our active transportation projects, our experiences show that we get to situations where either a project becomes infeasible, where projects becomes unsafe, whereas the basis, the foundation of these changes was additional safety. But when we get to these kind of blanket recipes for implementing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, our engineering experience shows that we get to these unsafe situations, infeasible situations. So again, my colleagues are all very experienced. They all know what I'm talking about. What I want to caution us is when we create these policies, we shouldn't go too deep into our engineering guidelines and policies and programs and create a master recipe for implementation of these facilities. We all know how to implement these facilities. I said we've done a lot, like the 20 miles of class 4 bikeway that were shown on the presentation. We did 4 or 5 miles of it in Encinitas just the past 4 or 5 years. So we are doing these improvements. It's just how we do them, a little bit more due diligence, a little bit more engineering evaluation, checking our standards, our guidelines, our master plans, our internal documents. That's the flexibility that I think everybody's after here. It's not like we're against implementation. We're just against how we want to implement this. One thing that I want to ask the SANDAG team is, there was a language in the goal, the first slide, that talked about wherever there's no good correlation between the cost and efforts required for a project and the usage of that facility. Where is that seen in this update? And if there is anything that I'm missing here, I want to appreciate my colleagues, the subcommittee. I went through all the comments and revisions. Encinitas is totally in support of all the revisions that were suggested by the subcommittee. We even like to see more flexibility in the language for implementation. The level of funding received from Transnet, just one single bullet in here can take away all of that funding just to cover one bullet here, one class 4 on a roadway with like 30 different driveways on a half-mile segment. That means like that class 4 by itself would cover our $3 million. So again, to reiterate, we are for this. We totally agree with the spirit of the change, how the policy is written. We just want to see engineering guidelines not being sacrificed just because we have this blanket recipe for all of our streets.
I'm sorry, I can't.
I believe he had a question. Did you have a question to staff in that?
Yeah, correct. About the correlation between the excessive cost and feasibility.
It's still in there in the procedures for excluding accommodations for pedestrians and bikes from projects as it was in 2008. So it's the second to last section, when the agency determines that not to include bike and ped accommodations in a project because the cost of doing so would be excessively disproportionate to the need or probable use. The agency must include a notice of that decision.
Tam Tran, City of Oceanside. So I agree with majority of what I'm hearing so far in the sense of the Transnet fund being utilized for class 4 bike. I think that limit the City of Oceanside on a lot of option how we utilize Transnet fund. I think like for Oceanside, what we would like is to be able to have the flexibility as well, how the Transnet fund can be utilized in mobility and pedestrian and cyclists. Majority of my experience in signal operation, and I can tell that driving through other city around here, the clearance time and the minimum green time for cyclists is not done properly, where we as an agency in operation, we could fix those things by getting more like bicycle detections system, utilizing possible Transnet fund or different funding opportunity to improve cyclists. Now, it's not like class 4 lane is not going to fix any issues. I think there's options in area where class 4 bike lane could resolve some issue, but the flexibility should be given to the city. Engineers should be able to reveal these area and make judgment call on how to resolve cyclist safety. Now, in Oceanside, we are in the middle of carrying in a project to improve pedestrian safety as well. We are upgrading our pedestrian countdowns to pedestrian signal hazard countdowns, and that should be improving pedestrian safety crossing the streets and so forth. So that's a good example. But as an agency, I think we should also work into collaboration. I can tell there was a project that we revealed probably 2 weeks ago that we want to do an inland rail trail between Oceanside to Escondido, and that project didn't went through because a nearby agency didn't have that connectivity. So I think a connectivity made things better for cyclists as well. So there's a lot of option, but again, I think the flexibility should be given to local agencies since engineer would be required to make a determination on these type of safety.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and through the chair, thank you so much. I was rereading everything and it's been a while. I think I missed the last couple meetings, but there's a good section of this document that is about the exceptions for how if you aren't able to meet this for safety or fiscal reasons or engineering, functional engineering, some of these components could be, we'll say, waived, deviated from. So what I haven't heard here today is, how does this need to change? Why can't we start with the goal is to look for multimodal complete streets? What do cities need if you cannot provide that? Because that's what I'm not hearing here today from, Mr. Frank's presentation. Great, they've done a lot, but what would he have needed to be more flexible? What do our cities, both rural and more urban and suburban, need for that flexibility, for that process? And I think that's a place to focus on here, because everybody's generally in agreement. We've been doing so much more for bike, pedestrian, ADA accessibility, but we have a lot of historic infrastructure that we can't fit everything in that right of way. So what do we need functionally as engineers, as planners, and in my case, as a sustainability director, to get us there and be able to still use Transnet funding, comply with ATP requirements, and move our cities forward in a reasonable timeline, because every dollar counts at this point, but also every mile counts when we're thinking about sustainable mobility, both for cars, biking, and walking.
Thank you. I have really enjoyed this very robust discussion. I very much appreciate everybody's discussion on the issue, and I'm not ending the discussion. I'm just waiting to kind of hear everybody out. I think it's important to take a step back and realize that we live in a very car-centric universe, right? And that is the universe which we play in our region, heavy car-centric. And, we have vehicles, we have very big vehicles ourselves and our families, we enjoy them. So that is part of our culture that then when we are trying to change that culture within our infrastructure of our city, we're not only facing pushback from ourselves, but our constituents, right? And I think that's something we don't maybe bring up, but we touched base on the National City Bicycle Master Plan about a month ago. There were so many comments against any bicycle lanes whatsoever, right? And a lot of those Transnet funds that we've received over the last few years have now turned into projects, but folks just don't want to share the road. And it is a culture that permeates throughout our city, and it makes it very difficult for us to continue to make sure that we have multiple modes of transportation in our city that are safe. So anytime we try to take a lane away and make sure that everybody drives or everybody uses a safe bicycle path, there is a wrath like there's no end within our communities. And I think you all probably face a very similar thing. I do want to point that out. I also want to point out that I like the idea of flexibility, but in terms of using Transnet funds in order to provide options for bicycle ridership, I think the presentation that was provided earlier by Mr. Frank, I mean, that's an example of a project for very avid bicycle riders. I don't imagine myself or my kids utilizing that bike path next to a freeway. So the difference is, I think there's cities that want to make sure that we incorporate that bicycle transportation and infrastructure within our communities, so that it is a very easy commute to get to the grocery store, to get to your friend's house, to get anywhere around our community. Whereas, maybe other municipalities are looking at something like this and want to make sure the funding goes to avid riders, which is all well and good. But I think maybe there's a difference in approach and ultimately who we intend to serve through these funds. So, we in National City have been very vocal and supportive, at least the majority of us, to make sure that we incorporate more bicycle infrastructure into our communities so we can make bicycle paths even safer. That means sharing the road a little more. And so we are continuing to have those discussions, and I urge some of your colleagues and council members to do the same. And it may require a little pushback from some of your constituents as well. Yep.
Thank you so much, Chair, for your comments there. I wanted to add to that. I think you're right on when you come up with the idea that we as cities have taken a tremendous amount of time and energy to determine what's important to our community and to balance the needs of all roadway users with an eye towards making sure we can make things safe. And I think what the proposal that Tom prepared does is it honors and respects local master plans and also provides some flexibility in that it references standards, which are best available standards, but that have a process by which you will determine what is the appropriate bicycle facility, rather than the proposal that SANDAG staff has provided, which is dictating you must build this on this street. And so I think that Tom's proposal really does get us closer to where we need to be as a region, respecting those local priorities, respecting the design process, and building in some flexibility so that we can, as cities, determine what we are able to do and how we're able to push forward incrementally the improvements for bike and pedestrian access, and not have to go through a SANDAG mandated process for, I can't do this, but to actually build the flexibility into the guidelines so that we're honoring these best available standards in the context of our community plans. So I'd like to just recommend when we as a Transnet Ordinance Amendment Subcommittee heard that this was going to be brought to the Mobility Working Group, Tom was gracious to quickly provide this alternative proposal. The alternative proposal I don't think is completely, there's even questions in the proposal itself, like we need to determine exactly where this applies. Your comment, Alyssa, regarding shelters is something we haven't really vetted with a group, nor with the transit operators. I know they'll want to have some comments on that. So I would recommend that that we ask the subcommittee to use Tom's current proposal as a starting point and kind of hash out those final remaining details, and then bring that back to the Mobility Working Group so that we can review something that is is fully prepared and considers all of the comments that have been made today.
Thank you. Any additional comments, questions, thoughts? It is only a discussion item. I would also like to point out that every dollar does matter. And so to a community like ours that wants to make sure that we get the most amount of usage, not just by avid bicyclists, but by normal everyday people, then that means that we're better spending funding that is most utilized by the most amount of people. So every single dollar matters. And I think we need to be conscious of that throughout our region because there's only limited funds to go around. But very lively discussion. Thank you all. Very appreciate it. This is only a discussion item. Any additional comments? Yeah.
I just wanted to respond also to the questions from my colleague here. We've talked a little bit about cost concerns, and there is a provision that addresses that. I don't know that because the provision that addresses cost concerns is very vague and undefined. I think that leaves us with some uncertainty, but the cost element is not necessarily our chief concern with the proposal as an agency. We're more concerned with right-of-way and space available, and also with, as some of our colleagues have spoken about today, with the elimination of engineering design judgment for a particular location. So when it comes to right-of-way acquisition that may be necessary to implement these improvements on our aging infrastructure, I think that's a very significant concern for San Marcos and probably for other agencies as well. The proposal
from SANDAG currently does make some allowances for this and says that the agency is not required to acquire additional right-of-way to improve bike access. But it goes further to say that the agency should consider reduced motor vehicle lanes, lane widths, and medians. Now, part of that I'm a huge fan of. I think we absolutely need to be reducing our lane widths wherever we have an opportunity to do so and wherever it is safe based on engineering judgment to do that. But the consideration there that we should drop motor vehicle lanes, I think that needs to be done carefully and in the context of the agency's evaluation of their needs as a city. So for instance, San Marcos is in the process of developing its active transportation plan. There's been a huge amount of effort that has gone into this, and we have looked at our infrastructure as a municipality citywide, and we've also looked street by street to see what fits based on what the key destinations are and where we can do those lane drops. That is something that we want to do as an agency. So we're open to eliminating lanes where it is safe and makes sense to do so. The concern is that that requirement to eliminate motor vehicle lanes could be held to an agency as a reason why they can absolutely fit these improvements in anywhere, even where a lane drop doesn't make sense from an engineering judgment perspective. So we're concerned that that in effect creates a loophole that can force design solutions that are not engineering, that are not sound from an engineering perspective. So those are a couple of the places where we are concerned that the exceptions do not provide the flexibility that we need as an agency to make good engineering judgments, including to implement our own active transportation plan, which has been very well studied. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. Yep.
I just quick question. I guess in terms of kind of gauging level of consensus here, could we make a motion to support the representative from the city of Escondido, just as a way to kind of gauge the support here amongst the membership?
I believe the item is just agendized for discussion, but we certainly can bring this back for discussion at this working group in January. I'd very much be open to that. Yep.
Yeah, real quick. So the subcommittee is currently not meeting in November or December. So we were going to come back to the mobility working group in March, if that works, after we've had some more discussion with the subcommittee.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 4. We have a presentation from SANDAG and the City of San Marcos regarding transportation technology planning and implementation in the San Diego region.
And thank you. And Isaac Echemendi. Simon and I are senior ITS planners in the regional planning department's technology planning team. We will be providing an overview of the technology planning efforts to help advance our regional plan's next operating systems strategy. I'm very excited today because you'll also be hearing from Isaac Echemendi, Director of Development Services and City Engineer from the City of San Marcos. So our goal for today's presentation is to talk to you about the technology planning program and next operating system, walk through some key project highlights that will bring Next OS to life, and hear from Isaac about how one of our local agency partners is advancing their transportation technology program. So I would like to briefly start with an overview of our team. The technology planning team is responsible for planning, development, and piloting technology projects, working with all of you. And these efforts help advance the regional plan, specifically the Next OS, which I'll talk about in a minute. I just mentioned technology projects. What do we mean by that? It refers to all the technology that supports the operations and management of highways, transit, and local roadway systems. These can be traffic signals, ramp meters, cameras, changeable message signs, any sensor technology. And working collectively, they are also commonly known as the Intelligent Transportation System, or the ITS. So traditionally, all these various transportation systems have operated and been managed independently by one agency or multiple agencies. And this approach has resulted in inefficiencies, some ad hoc planning and implementation, which often only addresses a specific project need or a location-specific need. So this is where NextOS comes into play. So what is NextOS? NextOS is a concept in which we envision a unified platform which can integrate data from different sources, that the one that you see on your right under data sources, and present it to all the different types of end users: public, planners, policymakers, and operators. Public could use it to plan a trip. Planners, policymakers, and operators could use it as a data analytics platform to see how each system is performing. The goal is we want to focus on how we use technology and data and move away from being them in different silos and not being able to use this data efficiently. We all know that technology is changing very rapidly, and we have to make all possible efforts to be in front of it. So as part of a planning process, we are thinking about identifying opportunities that will improve the existing systems. And when we are planning for new systems, it will lend itself to be part of the NextOS platform. So what are we doing to bring NextOS to life? So keeping the NextOS vision in context of not operating in silos, we are looking at the region's project planning efforts in 4 broad categories. One is the smart borders, where the focus is on efforts to make travel and trade easier and safer in the San Diego-Tijuana border region. Smart infrastructure, where we are looking at developing regional smart intersection system that will improve safety and efficiency for all different types of users, whether they walk, bike, or ride transit, or freight vehicles, or even emergency vehicles. Smart corridors, where we look at a multimodal management system, where we will make it possible for dynamically managed traffic, quickly respond to incidents and emergencies. And lastly, smart mobility, where we look into combining mobility options such as transit and flexible fleet services. Simon will be talking a little bit more in detail and give examples of projects under each of these categories shortly. While technology is an underlying component of all these efforts, we also need to keep in mind the other related parts in the process of bringing all these projects to life. I'm talking about the institutional and operational aspects that must be considered throughout the project development process. As part of technical efforts, we will make sure that we follow a structured process, make sure all the regulatory requirements are met, and make sure that the systems that we develop are standardized and they can talk to each other. But we also need to establish the institutional and operational coordination. Isaac will talk a little bit more about it. And the goal is to make sure that there's a common understanding between all parties involved on how we plan on managing the system and get a commitment on operating the system. This could be in the form of MOUs or MOAs. And in the end, the goal is that the benefits from all these advancements are achieved to their full potential in the region. So with that overview, I will now turn it over to Saima to walk us through the key project efforts.
Thank you, Suha. Hello, everyone. I'm Saima Musharat, Senior ITS Planner in the technology team. And Suha just provided a great overview of our team's role and responsibilities and how we're implementing the NextOS through different projects, namely the 4 use cases that she just explained. And I will be walking through some of the technology projects that we're currently working on, where we're applying this approach. So through these projects, we are working towards bringing in the ITS solutions, which also aligns with our regional plan goals. And one project that I'll be working you through is the Advancing Border Connectivity, or ABC project, as we call it. And the reason why we selected to showcase this project is because 3 of the 4 use cases that Suha explained are actually being implemented through this project. So Advancing Border Connectivity project came into fruition when we received the ATC MTD grant in 2020. ATC MTD is short form for Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment Program from FHWA. We were awarded about 9.3 million for implementing the NextOS components, and the total amount for this project is about 28 million. And we are working with different partner agencies, and some of you are actually present in this room as well in the South Bay region. And this project encompasses, as I mentioned, a lot of the use cases that Suha just explained. As you can see on the map, we have focused on the southern region of the San Diego area, partnering with cities of National City, City of San Diego, Chula Vista, as well as with Metropolitan Transit System, MTS, and also, of course, with Caltrans. And the reason why we focused our efforts on this region is because there are lots of goods movement and cross-border travel in this area with different transportation technology challenges, and which makes it a very good candidate for investment where we plan to expand the technology deployments throughout the region. So basically, of course, our ultimate goal is to make people's travel experience easier, and we're planning to do this with the technologies that I'll be briefly discussing in the following slides. So the first one is smart borders. This will include the development of a regional border management system, or RBMS. RBMS is a fully integrated border management by using technologies to create a cohesive system that enhances the border crossing experience. We already have a system for cross-border travel in place, and through this particular project, we're planning to upgrade the RBMS system by leveraging the existing system in plan to help distribute the travelers across the 4 port of entries that we have in the region, namely Tecate, San Isidro, Otay Mesa, and also the currently under construction, the Otay Mesa East project. And as you can imagine, we are closely coordinating with the Otay Mesa East project, which is the State Route 11 OME project, as we call it, to make sure that the systems will talk to each other. And also we're also working with them on the schedule part of it. So there's a lot going on. We are working in this binational environment to make sure that ultimately, this project will help people to have a more smooth experience at the customs border. And also, there's a lot of freight movement in this area, which contributes to idling and GAG. So making this experience easier and help the traffic smooth. It will also, advance or reduce the GAG emissions in this area. And then the next one is the smart infrastructure. And we are mostly focusing on the smart intersection system implementation. As Suha already touched upon it a little bit, smart intersection considers multimodal applications for signalized intersections. This concept focuses on vulnerable road users, particularly to enhance safety at intersection. Today, we have heard a lot of discussion on intersection safety, especially for pedestrians and bicyclists. So technology in this case is an enabler to help address that safety issue. So the location that we are focusing on for this smart intersection system implementation here is the San Isidro Border District. For context, this area is located in the US-Mexico border, north of San Isidro Port of Entry, which is one of the busiest land ports between San Diego and Tijuana. In March 2023 alone, we had over 600 pedestrians and 2.1 million personal vehicles just in this northbound direction. We also have the San Isidro Transit Center in this area, which is the second busiest transit center in the region, serving as a connecting point for trolleys and buses. As you can see, we have 906 and 907 transit routes connecting with this area. There's also local destinations like Las Americas premium outlets. So this is a very busy, bustling area with high demand for cross-border travel and also with heavy vehicular and significant pedestrian connectivity challenges. So how are we using technology to address some of these issues? On the right side of the slide, there are some examples of features that we have or we are planning to deploy as part of the smart intersections, which are green light extension for pedestrians, cyclists, people with disabilities and other vulnerable road users, transit signal priority, which is a feature that helps the transit move along the corridor, which also eventually increases the travel time reliability of transit, and then adaptive signal timing, which can help keep the traffic smooth overall, and also real-time traveler information. The next one is also another example of smart intersection system, but in a slightly different context. This one is on the Harbor Drive corridor, which is located near the port, and we have a lot of heavy commercial traffic, a lot of stop and go, and also with the naval base, the nearby shipyard parking lots, transit stop, very high volume of pedestrians as well. So the presence of all these different types of mode and users create the need for strategies to address safety and congestion. And some of the features that we are proposing here are freight signal priority that will initiate a green signal for when it senses a truck approaching the intersection, leading to reduced truck delays and idling. And also track traveler alerts and green light extension for vulnerable road users. Under smart corridors, we are focusing on SR 905 and also some portions of I-5, I-805. One of the examples in the region where we already have this next generation ICMS or integrated corridor management system is I-15. We have the ICM system on I-15. So this project will also be similar to that, where we are planning to have border traveler information, real-time information. And this area, again, this is near the border region. All of these major highways are converging at the same area. And there's lots of industrial and commercial land use across in this area. Also the Southwestern Community College. This is also an area which is prone to wildfires. So with all this context in mind, our ICM system will focus on incident alerts and evacuation routes here. And finally, for the smart mobility, one example that we have here is the flexible fleets implementation. And I just wanted to show what kind of experience we're trying to create in these places by using technologies. For example, this is a 3D rendering of the San Isidro area with different modes of transportation in the same place. We have flexible fleets. Of course, we have people crossing the streets and bicyclists. We have transit, kiosks for trip planning. So all these different modes are coming here. And at the end of the day, we as ITS planners, we are planning to use technology to provide that experience by working in the background and also by working hand in hand with the infrastructure and policy projects and by partnering with our local agencies and private vendors for data sharing and all that. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that we're staying on top of it. As Soha mentioned, technology is always changing, and we're working towards making that, creating that experience for our users. With that, I'll turn it over to Isaac.
Thank you. As was said, I'm Isaac Edgemendi. I'm the City Engineer and Development Services Director for the City of San Marcos. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview to our technology that we have at the city. We're very happy where we've gotten, but I really want to walk you through how we got there and just be candid about it. I think a lot of us here are working on improving technology within our individual cities and jurisdictions, but that's hard. It is quite hard, in fact. There's limited funding for many of us. There are plans that have to be in place. And oftentimes technology is changing under our feet. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and also about how this plays into the larger regional discussions. So first up, I want to talk a little bit about background. I'd love to say this is what we did, where we thought through a strategy, developed funding, implementation, and construction plans, and went into managing a robust technology system that could manage traffic for all modes in the city. Unfortunately, it's much more chaotic than that. And the reason why I wanted to bring attention to this, because this is related to lessons learned on technology. When we started our journey in the 90s for the city of San Marcos, we knew we wanted to implement and leverage technology. We didn't have a clear vision of that. So we started by looking into how we were going to do that. Ultimately, we got to 34 miles of fiber optic communication, 123 traffic signals interconnected via that fiber optic, as well as one additional fiber signal that's just standing out there on its own copper line, 16 traffic signals that are not interconnected, but also developing a system that provided emergency communications and direct central server access to those signals. It also connects Palomar College to City Hall for local broadcast. None of this was intentionally thought of with a master plan. As we had opportunity, we grew our system into this. Ultimately, this is our communication network and what we developed. Every single line you see here is a communication line through our heart of our city. There's also ones that go off the slide here. This communication and system feeds back to City Hall. But recently, it also feeds to our Public Works Department so they can make decisions about things happening in the field. It also goes to our Emergency Operations Center to help us during emergency management. As Simon mentioned, wildfires are a concern in some locations. We had the Cocos fire, which was our most recent fire in the city. And if we would have had the centralized system in our EOC, we could have watched firefighters on the hills from our cameras in a centralized location. So these technology systems don't just communicate to signals and help goods travel through the city. They can also help emergency management situations. And I would encourage everybody to evaluate their systems from that perspective as well. I wouldn't be a development services director if I didn't talk about land use context. As we developed, we were largely suburban, as much of North County is. That meant lots of cars, lots of intersections, and as we grew, we built out that fiber optic network. However, that doesn't stay the same. And now we have an urbanizing core at North City. These are images from our North City specific plan area, and the images you see of the buildings are buildings that are actually going up or built right now. Right now, we are building our first 12-story building in this area directly adjacent to Cal State San Marcos. This leads to a whole new realm of technology implementation that we have to venture into. We're no longer taking suburbanites from their homes to their jobs. We're also getting students to their college. We're making sure that they're housed appropriately, and we're dealing with all the challenges that come with an urbanizing core. So where are we with our future plans? Well, we just recently updated our traffic management center. This image was taken last week, so you can get a sense of what we've done. We've updated all of our servers. We've also moved to a more open system. We want to make sure that we can have systems that are designed and developed for the city of San Marcos. That's really crucial. We do not want a closed system to the point of working with all of you here and cooperating on a regional level. We have to have the ability to communicate with everyone. We have to have an architecture that works really well with everyone else. And that's going to be a challenge because when you have so many agencies in one room, everyone is going to do things slightly differently. But that doesn't mean that you can't develop a system that is ready to handle those challenges. So upcoming, we also have an adaptive project. This adaptive project is on our Nordall corridor. It kind of embodies what we're trying to achieve with technology. Not only do we have other agencies we're working with the city of Escondido and Caltrans, but we're also trying to see what is possible in one of our most congested shopping centers. Every single one of the blue nodes you see in the image above is a signal. The yellow signal is controlled by the city of Escondido. The two light kind of teal colored signals are controlled by Caltrans. So Caltrans has the TISMO, and we truly want to see that move forward. That will help us further our technology upgrades into this adaptive realm. And when we say adaptive, we truly want to have adaptive systems, ones that are using high density information in order to make decisions about how to clear out traffic. Idling vehicles will lead to additional greenhouse gases, which is not something that any of us want to see. So we're currently performing this pilot, and we're going to see if we have pre and post project evaluations and see if we can see meaningful improvements. However, there's many adaptive systems out there. So this may result in us needing to go through an iterative process as we try to find the correct adaptive product for this area. And so as we go through this, we're also eyeing other areas. If we can achieve improvements in this area, we can improve areas like San Marcos Boulevard, Twin Oaks Valley Road, which run east, west, and north-south respectively through the city. So we really are trying to leverage technology, and luckily leadership has been a great advocate of technology. As far as our objectives moving forward, cross-jurisdictional communication is key. We cannot be an island because vehicles are not an island. Travelers and goods movement is not an island. They don't just stay within the city. So that is one of the things we really want to see move forward. We're also looking at ways to increase data fidelity. With additional data, it allows us to make decisions quickly and accurately. And then also, we're looking at how can we improve transit ridership through these systems, through transit signal priority. And then, as I already mentioned, we're already looking at adaptive traffic management in order to make real improvements out on our system. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on the lessons learned. There's no right or wrong way to approach technology improvements within your jurisdiction. As I mentioned, I'd love to say we had a cohesive ITS plan that we methodically went through and developed. However, we took opportunities when they presented themselves. When a new 3,000 home subdivision came into the city, we added to our backbone infrastructure. When we had an opportunity to update our impact fees, we added fiber optic lines into that fee in order to fund future capital improvements. So basically, you can achieve the core infrastructure as you go, and it may have taken us 30 years to get to where we are today, but now we have great opportunities to further technology and really develop and coordinate with you all. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very insightful. Thank you. Any questions from members of the public?
I do not have any public comments.
Thank you. Any committee member comments or questions? None? No? I see some hands kind of halfway up. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you all for the presentation and thank Isaac for his leadership in this area. We're excited to work with you on Nordal, and glad that you were willing to take the lead on this. So thank you.
Thank you. This is only an informational item. Thank you so much again for the presentation. Moving on to item number 5, Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, Regional Climate Action Planning Grant. We have a presentation from Susan Friedman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. And I'll just say, in the interest of time, I know you have a few more items to go. I'm going to try and make this shorter than I had initially planned, but I'll also be back to the working group in January or February where we can really throw darts at some draft information. But really, the reason I'm here today to talk about this EPA grant that SANDAG received is that it's going to set up the region, local jurisdictions, SANDAG, the county, air districts, and tribes to be able to compete for a much bigger national pot of funding in the spring. It's all over $4 billion to undertake near-term greenhouse gas reduction measures. And so that's why we're chatting here. So real quick, this grant that SANDAG received, the board adopted it, approved it in September. So now staff, we're still working on some contracting, but working to get this done by March 1st, the first stage, which ties to that multi-billion-dollar funding opportunity. We need to develop what's called a priority climate action plan, and that's looking at measures that could be completed before 2030 to reduce emissions in the region. The second thing we'll be doing, which we'll be coming back many times for, is what will be called the comprehensive climate action plan. And that's going to be developed hand in hand with the regional plan for 2025. And that'll look at everything, new greenhouse gas inventory for the region, and look at near-term, mid-term, long-term measures, and then some reporting. So I'm going to go past all the stuff we've got to do based on EPA. But just as a quick reminder on the pie chart on the right, you know, about half of our emissions come from transportation in the region, followed by electricity, which is including buildings and natural gas. So a lot of focus is in these areas. We're working with your climate action planning, climate sustainability, other sustainability staff in the local governments and at the public agencies. And so we surveyed these folks about what's in your existing caps for those that have them, or sustainability plans, and what they consider priorities. So what we've been hearing is areas to focus this priority climate action plan on are in transportation, 2 areas, the electrification of things. This could be cars, trucks, buses, individual as well as shared, as well as VMT reduction measures. So these are things like increasing transit service, having flexible fleet options, first last mile options, bike and ped, which we heard about earlier. And then building electrification, that's a big one, especially locally, really tackling existing buildings through energy efficiency, renewables, and this moving to electrification. And so it mimics what we heard at a local level, as well as where there could be regional collaboration. I'll call out that folks also identified that they want to see hopefully funding that could go to climate adaptation measures, but EPA released what the funding opportunity is last month, and it's not really part of this grant, but there'll be other opportunities later. We've also been talking to community members and hear a lot of similar things. It's a little wider. So I've already mentioned the EV and the VMT areas, but some other things we've heard about are with the urban forest, water efficiency, addressing waste. So this is wider than what the mobility working group does, but the transportation elements of this and the opportunity for funding regional projects is where we really want to get input from this group. I do want to bring up also, as part of this grant, EPA has stated that there needs to be this is important, there needs to be an analysis of low-income and disadvantaged community impacts, which they call LIDAC. So that's similar to what we do already in California and the region. But what they're looking to do is, in their implementation funds, is to have 40% of the funding go to projects that will benefit these communities. And with this planning grant, they're allowing for a lot of engagement and working with local community-based organizations. And so we set aside about $150,000 to work with the CBOs that we have in our social equity working group that are part of our outreach network, which span the region. And then we've also planned to be reaching out for, county unincorporated areas. A couple more things with the outreach and engagement. Since there's such a tight deadline, we really only get a few months to try and write this thing before the board, it's got to go before the board of directors, that we've asked for from all the local governments what outreach and engagement you've already done when you're looking at climate action planning or decarbonization. And we've been receiving that from your staff. And we're going to compile that and try and not reinvent the wheel or repeat the same things to folks, but get out there and bring things to the next step for what projects can be implemented. We also are planning a climate workshop that's really targeting community members. That'll be in December. So again, why here today is I would love to get any feedback. Like I mentioned at a high level, hey, VMT reduction, hey, electrification. But if there's anything that you all really specifically care about, in addition to what you've seen in the regional plan already, like I can take that now and I can take that in meetings that are follow-ups to this, whether it's just with your jurisdiction or at subsequent meetings when I'm back here in January. But to say, EPA has released what we're doing right now is a $1 million four-year planning grant. That is the prerequisite for applying for competitive dollars of 4.6 billion nationwide to implement actions that are in this priority climate action plan. So for instance, if we say we want to reduce VMT via adding bike lanes and things like that, then the phase 2 application would be about different bike projects. We would expect the application for phase 2 to include lots of different project types. The EPA is allowing for anywhere from a $2 million to $500 million project budget. So we're looking at compiling like regionally a suite of projects that hit on transportation, greenhouse gas reductions, as well as building reductions, and some sprinklings of some other issues that we hear are important in communities. Quick turnaround, the competitive grants due to EPA April 1. This planning grant where we identify the measures so that you can compete for April 1 is due March 1. So we are going to be in the writing stage of this next month and the month after. Wanted to get in front of that with you all to hear if you had any initial feedback that we then incorporate and bring back in the new year. So with that, I can stop and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from members of the public?
There are no public comments on this item.
Any questions or comments? Yes, Ms.
I want to first thank you, Susan, for working so closely with all the stakeholders. I know you've really been working hard to engage all the cities in the county and agencies on this effort. So thank you. I also love to hear that you're building off existing engagement that's been happening within the cities instead of recreating that and starting from zero. I think that's a huge kind of cost efficiency that you have engaged in, also knowing that you have tight timelines. I want to underscore a couple things that I think the city of San Diego is looking for from this regional effort. And while VMT and mobile source emissions are highest for the region, that building decarbonization piece is, I think, a piece that, whether we know it or not, sitting here as mobility leads, is a unifying effort. And that is because the state building code is already moving new build to be all electric. And so what does that mean for our grid? And what does that mean for supply and getting those resources to us? We just heard in the item before us about the Next OS, and that also relies on so much of the power capacity. And I would really love to see SANDAG put a lot of emphasis in the electrification, distributed energy focus, and then helping our residents and small businesses within those communities, those LIDAC communities, to be able to empower them to make the transitions that they need to make looking forward. So thank you so much for bringing this here today.
Thank you. And just really quickly, we'll be at the Sustainable Communities Working Group also, and I think a lot more talk will focus on buildings there and energy, but just FYI.
Thank you so much. Any additional comments, questions? Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure you're aware that the city of Oceanside has a grant with SANDAG for the NEV projects, these circuits. And one of the issues that we ran into is these electric shuttle services did not have a charging stations. So they utilize the current city's charging stations at the city parking stalls. Don't know would this grant for provide future type of pilot project like the circuits to include charging stations like mentioned, so then it won't take the city facility or stalls out for use to charge city vehicle versus right now is charging the circus vehicles.
We are looking at that to be able to fund flex fleet projects, not just the charging infrastructure aspect of that, as well as for municipal fleets, like different elements of it. So that is something that we're exploring, and I plan to have in the PCAP. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any additional comments, questions? All right, this is an informational item. Thank you so much again. We will be, in the interest of time, moving over item number 6 and item number 8 to our next regularly scheduled meeting. With that said, item number 7, Specialized Transportation Grant Program Cycle 13, call for project kickoff, presented by Zach Rivera from SANDAG.
Hopefully go back. Perfect. Good morning, Chair and members of the Mobility Working Group. My name is Zach Rivera, as the Chair mentioned, and I serve as the Program Manager of the Specialized Transportation Grant Program, or STGP. Today, I'll explain what the STGP is, provide an overview of the Cycle 13 call for projects, and discuss ways to get involved. And I'll try to do it in the time remaining. So the STGP funds a broad range of specialized transportation services for older adults and individuals with disabilities when fixed route public transit is insufficient, unavailable, or inappropriate. The STGP seeks to complement fixed route public transit service to strengthen our region's specialized transportation network. Through the STGP, we provide funding through the Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 program and the Transnet Senior Mini Grant Program. Eligible applicants are nonprofit organizations and local governmental agencies, such as local jurisdictions. While there are many similarities between both funding sources, there are some differences too. The Section 5310 program, administered by SANDAG, funds projects in the urbanized areas of San Diego County, where the target population is both older adults and individuals with disabilities, and the target population is for older adults is 65 and older. For the Senior Mini Grant Program, the projects are county-wide. The target population is specifically geared towards older adults, and older adults are defined as 60 and over. There are 3 operating grant types under the STGP: mobility management, operating, and capital grants. So mobility management grants consist of activities that improve coordination among public transit and other transportation service providers. Eligible mobility management grants include transportation information and referral services, as well as travel training. Operating grants consist of activities to operate, maintain, and manage a transportation service for older adults and individuals with disabilities. And then lastly, capital grants consist of the acquisition of contracted transportation services or the purchase of property, such as accessible vehicles. About every 2 years, SANDAG holds a competitive process or call for projects to allocate available STGP funding. Our current estimate for cycle 13 is about $9.2 million, and the forecasted increase is due to the bipartisan infrastructure law. We began the cycle 13 process in earnest by holding this STGP cycle 13 call for projects kickoff meeting on October 10th, 2023. About 50 stakeholders attended the meeting, and it was successful in gathering input on the region's specialized transportation needs and soliciting feedback on the program goal. Among many comments, a few themes emerged: spontaneity, 2, availability, and 3, accessibility. The meeting recording, presentation slides, Q&A, and a summary of feedback are all posted on the STGP webpage, which I'll share later. So I encourage you to check out those resources. So in terms of the next steps, we plan to dedicate the next 6 or so months to gathering further input as we refine our program goal and project selection criteria. We plan to hold a specialized transportation workshop in February to focus specifically on the project selection criteria used to score proposed projects. We also plan to come back to you in the March to April timeframe to talk about that project selection criteria. In the meantime, my ask of all of you is to reach out to me, reach out to us If you have thoughts, feedback on the region's specialized transportation needs, feedback on the program goal, or if you're interested in applying yourself as jurisdictions. In the May to June timeframe, we anticipate presenting the proposed project selection criteria to the ITALC and the Transportation Committee. And then pending board approval, we plan to release the call for projects on July 1st, 2024, opening up a 90-day application window. So again, I encourage you to stay connected with us as we embark on this process. Our webpage is www.sandag.org/STGP. You can email us at grants distribution. All that information is in the agenda packet before you. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from members of the public?
There are no public comments on this item.
Any comments or questions from committee members? No. This is an informational item. Thank you so much, Zach. Very much appreciated. Last item, simply upcoming meetings. So the next mobility working group meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 11th, 2024 at 9:30 a.m. here. And a couple of the items that we skipped today we'll be discussing at that meeting as well. Thank you so much. We're adjourned at 9:24. Thank you.